Are you a leader and you find that your people struggle to come up with fresh new ideas? It's like you want them to think more entrepreneurially or more innovatively or to take more initiative and chances, but they just don't? Well, the issue may not be that they're not creative or they lack initiative. It might be how they feel about the environment they're in. In short, they might lack psychological safety. Hey, this is Avish Parashar. I'm a professional speaker. I've done improv comedy for over 30 years, and for the last 20 years, I've been using improv as a tool to help businesses and professionals respond to change, communicate more effectively, and build stronger cultures. This is one of the things I see a lot, is this idea of, people come to me and say, we want our people to think more creatively and entrepreneurially and not just do their jobs, but to think more innovatively. And they think the issue is people just feel shut off from their creativity. And that is sometimes the case, and I talk a lot about that in my programs. But sometimes when I get in, especially if it's like a workshop, you start to discover that the people are lacking in psychological safety. They don't feel comfortable thinking that way or taking those chances. As a leader, you know that people are your biggest and best resource. But you may feel like they themselves don't act that way, like they're holding themselves back. In fact, you might start to believe in your head like you believe in them more than they believe in themselves. And you just want them to step up and take action. Now, obviously, you want this for them because you know it's going to help them. But as a leader, you also know that if they don't think more creatively and take more initiative, that number one, there's going to be less innovation in your group and in your organization. Number two, there's going to be less growth, which means less engagement, which means a chance for lower morale and greater turnover. And number three, it means it's going to be more work for you because you're going to have to keep driving the people and you're going to be the one who has to keep coming up with the innovation and what to do versus kind of sharing the work and letting everyone else get involved. As I said, I've seen this a lot in a lot of the programs I do. And so my approach when I'm brought in specifically for the employees is to use improv as a tool, kind of gets under the radar, it makes everyone laugh and have fun, but it gets them out of their comfort zone, gets them opening up their creativity, and shows them how to be willing to take more chances. And I do this by talking mostly about the idea from improv of saying yes and instead of yes but. Foundational idea to the world of improv, and offstage I use this idea of switching from but to and to show people how they can access their creativity, think in terms of little steps, and adjust and innovate as they go. However, no matter how great the people embrace the ideas I'm talking about and understand how to think creatively, they're still going to feel limited if they're not having this sense of psychological safety. So in this video, rather than addressing the mindset that I would speak to the employees about how to be open to change, I'm going to speak more to you, the leader, and how you can build this idea of psychological safety and why that's so important if you really truly want them to take more initiative and think more entrepreneurially and creatively. So psychological safety is this idea sort of pioneered by Amy Edmondson, who is a researcher, and she was working with hospital systems. And what she found is in some hospital systems, they kind of saw how many errors were happening, and they found the highest performing hospital systems or groups were the ones that had this idea of psychological safety. And in fact, some of the worst ones didn't. So there's a strong correlation. Because when they dug deeper on errors, they found that, oh, look, this group isn't performing well, but they don't have a lot of errors, so what's going on? But what they found out is it's not that the lower performing groups had no errors, it's that they lack psychological safety, so they're committing the errors, but no one was reporting them because they're afraid of getting reprimanded, criticized, or failing. So psychological safety was incredibly powerful for teamwork and productivity. And in fact, Google, yes, the Google, launched a large initiative within their own company. It was like a 2-year project called Project Aristotle, where they internally tried to figure out what are the common traits of the highest performing teams. And at the end of this, they came up with 5 traits. The number one trait they found for the highest performing teams across Google was psychological safety. When teams felt they had psychological safety, they performed well. If they didn't, they didn't. So what is psychological safety? In a nutshell, psychological safety is the feeling people have that they can speak up, share ideas, admit mistakes, and so on, without feeling like they will be punished, ridiculed, reprimanded, or in some way attacked for it. It sounds so basic, but it is amazing how many groups don't feel that. they feel like they will, if they raise their hand and ask a question, they might get criticized. You should know the answer to that. If they come up with an idea that won't work, instead of people building off of it, accepting it, or just sort of supporting the fact that they tried, they'll get cut down for even coming up with such a bad idea. So a group that has psychological safety, people will share, they will admit their mistakes, which means they can learn from them. They'll ask questions, sometimes important probing ones that need to be asked, so that everyone can be like, oh yeah, we didn't think about that. And in groups that don't have psychological safety, they won't do any of these things. Everyone will put their heads down and just do their work, not stick their neck out, not suggest new ideas, and not try new things. So if we go back to the premise, if you are a leader and you really want your people to step up and innovate and be creative and try new things, you can see how if they don't feel psychological safety, they won't do these things, no matter how much you encourage them, no matter how much training on creativity or innovation you give them. If they don't feel psychologically safe, they're not going to do any of the things you want them to. So right now, you might be thinking, no, you're wrong. That's not my issue. I do let people make mistakes. I do let people share ideas that might be bad. I encourage it. I'm constantly telling people, share your ideas. Let me know. Well, two things about that. Number one, it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter if you think I'm doing all the right things to build psychological safety. If your people don't feel it, they don't have it. And it doesn't matter if you're saying share your ideas, because deep down, for whatever reason, they don't. And if you're a new leader, like if you're new on the team, like maybe you've been a leader for a while, but now you're working with a new team, this might have nothing to do with you. It might be they've had bad prior experiences. So realize that it doesn't matter what you're saying to them. It's what they're feeling. Number two is this is also a team thing. So even if you're encouraging bad ideas or willingness to try and creativity and innovation and questions, they're also going to be worried about the psychological safety from the whole team. So if they feel like, well, yeah, my boss will be supportive, but Joe over here is going to roll his eyes, or Lisa over here is going to talk bad about my idea later, or Steve right here in the middle of the meeting is going to jump on me for this bad idea, they're not going to say anything. So as a leader, you need to know both of those things and address them. So knowing this, here are 3 ways you can start building psychological safety in your team, in your department, in your organization. And they all start or involve somehow with the idea of saying yes and, because it's so powerful, or from my work in improv comedy in general. Number 1 is to start with having a yes and default response. Now, what this means is that when you're in a meeting or even talking one-on-one and someone shares an idea or something that's wrong, you're going to immediately want to correct it. And that makes sense. You're the boss, you're the manager, you're the leader. If someone's sharing something that won't work or they incorrectly understood something, you're going to want to say, yeah, but. And you might even do it with a good intention, like, yeah, but here's why. Let me share why that won't work. Totally understandable. But if you already in a place where you don't have psychological safety, every yes, but is like a tiny little dagger that sticks in there and reduces that psychological safety even further. What you want to do is start with the default of yes and. So in all of my programs, this is the foundation of what I talk about. When I'm doing a keynote or a training, I talk about how you want to say yes and as the default, not as an automatic response where you agree to that bad idea and then go implement it, but rather more from an open-minded conversational standpoint. So if someone is sharing you an idea that you're like, that's not a very good idea, you don't want to say, yeah, but here's why that won't work. You say, yes, and what made you think of that? Or yes, and could you talk about that more? Or yes, and how would you apply that in this scenario? So what you're doing is you're showing the person that you're listening, you're respecting, and you're understanding. And after you have that yes, and conversation, you can then say no or yes, but, and explain why. But if the first words out of your mouth are yes, but, it immediately cuts rapport and damages psychological safety. The second thing you can do is respond to failure and mistakes as learning points rather than something that needs to be punished. So if you want people to think innovatively, entrepreneurially, and take initiative, at some point they are going to mess up. It's not going to work right. It's going to go wrong, especially in the beginning if they've never done it before. And in those cases, it is absolutely critical that you don't punish the behavior. Now, some of this is a yes and yes but thing. Someone takes some initiative, it doesn't work. You're going to want to say, ooh, yeah, but that's not the way I meant. Yeah, but that's not what you were supposed to do. Because emotions are going to be high. Maybe a project failed as a result. Maybe a customer got upset and now there's lots of stress and tension and more work that needs to be done. And it's totally understandable that you're going to be stressed. But if your real long-term goal is to build psychological safety and develop a mindset of entrepreneurship, innovation, initiative, you have to reward that initiative. And that starts by saying yes and. So, yes and, what can we learn from this? Yes and, I really appreciate that you were trying to think outside the box. Now, you can almost hear it in my voice. What you want to fill in next there is the but. Yeah, I appreciate what you did. That's so good. But here's why it was bad. That's going to cut psychological safety. You got to start with just the positive. The yes and, the yes and. That's going to show you truly are standing behind what you're recommending people do. Because one of the things that cuts rapport and morale and psychological safety is hypocrisy. If you're standing there as a leader and constantly telling people, yeah, I want you to try things and take initiative, and the minute they do and it doesn't work, you lose your mind or you criticize them, it's going to come across as being a hypocrite. And they're not going to want to do it again. Now, again, this doesn't mean that you never correct the behavior. It's just a matter of timing. When the emotions are high, in the moment, you got to be positive, reward, praise the effort, what they were trying to do. Then later on, you can say, okay, now let's talk about what happened and how we can make sure it doesn't happen again. This involves controlling your own emotion so that you don't launch into them and create that negative association for them around taking chances. Number 3, and this will be the hardest for many people, is you have to welcome feedback, criticism, opposition, and you have to say yes and to it instead of yes but to it. So this kind of comes back to the hypocrisy issue, is you need to model the behavior you want if you're going to create psychological safety, which means you need to let people come to you and tell you when you fail, when you've done something wrong, when you're being hypocritical or not acting in the way that you want everyone to act. Because sometimes an employee is going to come to you and they're going to give you feedback on something or say, hey, you didn't do this. And your defensive response, the human defensive response, is to immediately say, yeah, but you don't understand, or yeah, but this is a different situation. Or the worst one, yeah, but I'm the leader, I'm the manager, so that's what I have to do. You will lose psychological safety right away. What you need to do instead is to welcome the feedback and be open to it. And you can't just tell people, yeah, I have an open door. I want to hear your feedback. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your criticism. And then respond negatively once it starts. You have to ask for it and then be very open to it. This is why in my keynotes, I talk very much about the idea of saying yes and when you feel defensive. Because when you feel defensive, the response is going to be to say yes, but, and that's going to cut the psychological safety. What you want to say is yes and. Now again, this is not agreeing. If someone says to you, oh, you were hypocritical in that situation, you don't want to say, yes, I was, and here's, how else I screwed you over. Like, no. But you want to say, yeah, you know what, you have a point, and I'm going to think about that. Or, yeah, you're right, I did that, and here's what I'm going to do to work on it myself, because I'm a work in progress. Right? What this does is this shifts from adversarial and argumentative to kind of collaborative and empathy and working together. It's going to remove the hypocrisy, and that will really create psychological safety because this person will feel like they can speak up. They can point out when they see things that are being done incorrectly. And that's going to pay those long-term dividends of building psychological safety and building that culture, leading to innovative thinking, entrepreneurial thinking, and initiative. So there are 3 ways you can start using psychological safety or start creating psychological safety in your team, your department, and your group right away, all that build off the ideas of improv comedy and yes and. Hopefully you found that helpful. If so, be sure to subscribe to this channel and give me a follow. And if you are leading your team through a change or you want to build more psychological safety and you do want help either with me working with a leadership team or having me speak to your employees, I'm happy to do so. Please visit my website, contact me. I'd love to chat.